So, everybody, welcome to our movie night tonight. We are going to honor Terry Freeman, and as you can tell, we're deeply engaged in conversation. They're trying to talk over me, and I'm trying to introduce this program. It's all normal. It's all normal. So, anyway, so we're going to sit at the kitchen table or the dining room table tonight, and we're going to honor Terry, who has been the most remarkable friends for mine at probably at least 35 years.
Okay. This is Catherine from St. Louis.
All right.
Linda, St. Louis.
Roxy.
Jeanette.
Janet.
Nancy.
Just a guy wandering.
Hello,
Hi.
this is Jay.
Okay, and this is Billy.
And this is Judy from Seattle.
So how I met Terry was there is a World of Difference program that began in St. Louis. And somehow I got to be a facilitator, and that's where I met Terry, who was also a facilitator, but also at the same time already a professor at Florissant Valley Community College. And from the day we first met, there has been such a great harmony and appreciation of his loving kindness and brilliance that I've just continued to admire, and I'm so grateful for his friendship and his support all these years for the movie night specifically that we're going to focus on tonight. So I want Terry to share a few of the things that he's been doing. And one of the things, he just came back from the 100 Black Men, which he is the National Youth Coordinator. Is that correct, Terry? All right.
To do this, I'm at a loss for what to say, actually, because I do what I do, but I don't think of it as particularly, I got to be somewhere, got to be doing something. So why not just be doing something good? Hopefully, good choices. And it's really, I guess, I'll get to 100 Black Men, but the foundation for my parents, I think, was just to hurry up and help. And the story I tell, if I'm walking and we're going into the supermarket and there's a woman with bags or something, that she would say, "Why are you still here? Hurry up and help." I mean, that is, go open the door or go help carry something. And that is, and my dad, who worked a lot on the road, would come in, and he's the one that said, "You need to cut the neighbor's lawn and don't ask her for money." And because otherwise I would have had a surveyor's eye to make sure I would not cut a blade of grass that wasn't ours. And the lawns were adjacent. There was no fence or anything in between. But the surveyor would have been proud of the line that I drew. And he would say, "No, cut the whole thing." And that is, and don't let me hear you asking for money. That's what you're supposed to do. So I always volunteered for things. And the way that I became the National Youth Director was the way I became a lot of things in my life. And I've been very blessed and fortunate that I've just had good things happen, over and over. And there have been 36 national conferences, and I just finished my 28th consecutive conference. And I've done 29 out of the 36 for a national organization. But in 1995, I went to the conference, and Dr. Ozell Sutton was working with youth. And I just asked, "Do you need any help?" And he said, "Sure." And I started making suggestions, and he followed them. And at the end of the conference, he said, "Tag." Not his words, but this is the way it felt. "Tag, you're it." And I was able to take that and run with it. And it's just fortunate that when I volunteered for things, people gave me leeway. I got involved with the World of Difference, where Joyce and I met, because in late '87, and I think the second workshop that they did when Ron Jackson was the director, I went out to Maryville, and just to listen to it, I was curious. I said, "This sounds interesting." And afterwards, I asked, "Is there anything I can do to be a part of that?" So I'm still a facilitator there, and so now I've logged over 30 years being a trainer in a world of difference, and just showing up. And I managed Skate King Roller Rink for 11 years. I went there to learn how to skate. And when I was learning how to skate, I was telling other people that, well, this is how I learned it. And pretty soon I had a little following because of how I explained it. So they asked me to teach skating, even though I was still learning. And then the owner came through and said, we need managers. And so I ended up managing, and I designed some of the layout of the rink and their employees manual. And so things just happen. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch advertised, we want community writers. So if you're interested, submit an article. So I said, I'm an engineer, but what have I got to lose? So I wrote something and I submitted it, and I was selected as the first person to have that article read. So I wrote for 3 years for the Post-Dispatch. And so the lesson that I've always given to students is just show up.
I'll put you to work.
Just show up and be part of it. I did inroads for 11 years, and by volunteering for no pay to do workshops for students. They provided the workshop material, and that built up my repertoire for workshops. And then they offered me a job. I said, I'm happy being a teacher. I can't take your job. And they said, well, how about if we create a position for you part-time and pay you for that? And I said, sure. Let's go and let's do. And that is, I went to UMSL, and then that ended up being the first African American to get a PhD in higher education from UMSL. And just one thing, first I took students to NSBE, and they said, well, you can't put the name of St. Louis Community College on your badge because community colleges aren't eligible to be a part of NSBE. They're only four-year schools. And I said, where does that say that?
Yeah.
And they said that, well, it's in the Constitution. I said, let's get the Constitution. And we took a look at it, and it said, you must be in an accredited school. I said, well, we're accredited. And then we went through, and they said, well, now that you look at it, I guess you're right, but we don't have your paperwork at the conference. And I said, no problem. This was on a Thursday. I went back, I made a phone call to Florissant Valley, and I got the president and I got the chancellor, and they all signed it and overnighted all of the paperwork for Friday, and I presented it to them, and then we fought back and forth because they really didn't want us in the power structure, and they said, well, okay, you got us, you're in. And then when we got back, we got a call from the national office, you're not really in, don't resubmit that. And so we resubmitted anyway. We came to the conference the next year, and they had a ballot initiative to preclude community colleges from being a part of NSBE.
Excuse me, Terry, what is NSBE?
National Society of Black Engineers.
That's right. Okay.
And so we got the students together, and we went to Kinko's, and we printed up 1,000 flyers of vote no on the initiative, and the initiative went down. And so they were not happy, so we became the first community college in the country to have a chapter in NSBE, and I took students to that NSBE conference for 22 consecutive years. And doing that, and again, it was just show up and put yourself in a place for things to happen. And so the conference that I just came from with 100 black men, what they used to do, with young people is they had a banquet, and they would have what I call the old heads that would come up on the dais, and they'd have maybe 2 or 3 students who would come up, and all the old folks would talk about the wonderful things that they're doing in the chapters around the country, because 100 Black Men has chapters across the country and also overseas. And I just raised the question because I had done something similar. I ran 10 programs, 10 summers I spent running programs for outreach to middle school and high school students. And one of the things that I did with them, and one of the things I did with Inroads, is that when they had the honors banquet, let the young people run it. So instead of, if we're doing these phenomenal things with young people, they're our work product. Rather than having us talk about our work product, and this is a conference would have 1,000, 1,500 people in the audience from around the country, let them talk about it. So they gave me
What
the
a
latitude.
concept, I might add.
They gave me the latitude with some back and forth of with the workshop, and the large conference would have a couple of luncheons and a couple of breakfast programs. They had script writers for what I call the grown folks. The grown folks ate steak. The grown folks had all of these things, and the kids had their workshops and their activities. This last time we were in Florida, so we had a STEM workshop. We went to the Everglades and rode airboats and sighted alligators, and so we did a lot of activities. But
Which program is this?
this is 100 Black Men of America, their national convention. But going back about a little over 20 years with this, maybe 25 years, I said, how about if we just have young people on the dais? And that turned into no one over 18 on the dais.
Oh,
And they run the whole program. They will be the MCs, the speakers, everything
Wow.
going on. The only person over 18 who can get on the dais will be the people who sponsor, can be invited by the young people to the microphone to give brief remarks about their support, and then they go back and sit down. And that is,
That's draining.
and that is, but that was, and because I wanted a formative experience. But the other step that I took, and it's again the steps that I took similar, because I've always believed if you get that everyone has power, privilege, and platform, and when you have whatever power you have, whatever privilege you have, whatever platform you have, use it.
Yeah.
So I created and helped to coordinate a scholarship at the community college for 17 years. And that was for an engineering scholarship. And I wrote the criteria for it and argued for it, that I didn't want another 3.0 scholarship. I wanted to increase the number of engineers. So the qualification for a scholarship was an 18 ACT and a 2.5 GPA, which is, in engineering, typically you're talking 24, 25, 26 ACT to qualify. But I wanted to expand the pool. And again, they let me have my way. And so you let me have my way,
Wow.
I will do it. And over those 17 years, and it's in a book chapter, the success that we had, that we had the students, not all of them completed the associate's degree, but the completion rate was 60% for an associate's degree from that starting point. And when they transferred to Missouri S&T, their success rate after transfer was 94.8 for female and 94.8 for male and 95.2 for female.
Wow.
For a net rate, success rate of about 56%, where the national average, it was 39%.
Oh.
So that is when you create opportunity and you encircle people, because the program I put together, we're going to have an advisor, we're going to have a counselor, we're going to go to those conferences, and we're going to do tutoring, and we're going to build teams within that. So there are literally hundreds of African American students who are engineers, and so many of them many of them have PhDs, have master's degrees. Some of them are running businesses right now. And then one that I'm just really proud of is a young lady who started at the community college in developmental math, the lowest math class that we offer.
And that's seriously low.
Right, that is to get her associate's.
Seriously low.
To get her associate's degree, she had to take 11 math classes at the college.
Wow.
In September of last year, she started as assistant professor of robotics and artificial intelligence at Cornell.
Wow. Wow.
So
Just give them the opportunity.
you give them, because you never know
Motivation.
where people are, what if you can get them to agency. And see, and we spend a lot of time talking about all of the barriers that we need to tear down. Well, we're never going to tear down enough barriers. At the same time that we're tearing down barriers, we have to create climbers. And that is, you know, people who are going to sit, and that's been the history of black and brown and white and marginalized communities, that we can talk about all of the obstacles that are there, but embedded in the history of any of those groups that you can identify are people who succeeded against all odds.
11 classes
And
to get to basic. She really did.
And that is, and so there are so many stories that I can tell. And she came out of Gateway High School locally. I have the young man that was told that he was educably handicapped and that he's now a professor of mathematics and engineering. That is, you know, have someone who was, you know, told that he's probably not engineering material. And he has the record for the fastest PhD in the history of Missouri, S&T. That is, I mean, there are so many stories. You know, students who transferred and got patents, students who transferred and had their GPA go up. So going back to 100 Black Men, not only did I want these students, this to be 18 and under, I also knew that if I turned it over to the chapters and said send me great students, they would send me their golden the golden child, and they would be phenomenal. The program would be phenomenal. I said, no, we're going to build it on site. So they took a tremendous gamble that you now have a 4-day conference, and on Saturday morning, they just had Dr. Freeman. And when the kids started coming in on Wednesday night and Thursday morning, because it kicks off on Thursday morning, I'm getting volunteers. Do you want to be on the program? And the qualifications, that it's not an audition, we're going to meet 10 minutes after every session, after every workshop, after every breakfast, after every luncheon, and we're going to talk about the theme. And if you want to find a way to be part of this program, then let me know. If you keep showing up, I'll get you on the program. And so we build it on site from Wednesday night, and at this year it was 9 to 11. At 9 o'clock, and I asked them, be in your seats at 8 o'clock in the morning, because we are never going to start late, you know, for our youth program. The grown folks start late; they can do that. We're not going to start late, and we're not going to run. We're not going to run over, and it is nerve-wracking, because what if they don't volunteer? What if they don't step forward? But yeah, just over the years, they sing the national anthem. They sing Lift Every Voice. They do the invocation. They are the MCs. They are the speakers. Yeah, they do spoken word. We've had dancers. We've had musicians. We have had they put together a choir, you know, one year. That is, and I've never, nor has anyone ever heard the whole program until Saturday morning. Because all I do is say, this is the report from the youth breakfast. So these are your words. I have some guidelines. Tell us what you think we need to hear. Comment on how we've been helpful to you. Make suggestions on what you think we can do better. But these are your voices, and you put it together. What I'm going to do for you is, when we meet, I'm going to say, tell me something. Okay, you haven't written your speech yet. Maybe you have written your poem. Some of them may come when we were doing it year after year before COVID. Then you would have some of them who saw it the year before, so they had a sense of what it would look like. I didn't have that this year because we were 2 years out and online on COVID. And so I'm hearing this and I'm hearing that, because I don't want to put a powerful orator before someone who is struggling in oratory. And what I wanted is, I wanted the audience to see the various stages of people. We stayed in the Diplomat Hotel in Hollywood. We've stayed in the MGM Grand. We stay in the best hotels in the city when they go to the ballrooms. We were on the beach, and right there, and said, you're not going to know many adults who spoke at a ballroom of this size, and that's what you're going to do. But the struggle is we never have a meeting as long as an hour over that time. This is what we need to do. I'm going to see you after this next workshop, and we're going to take 10 to 15 minutes, tell me something, and then I just position them. Or I find out what is it that you want to do and how do you want to be a part of it. That's your 1 year where I had some young kids, and the participants are from 8 to 18. The
8 to 18?
Yeah, I've had 8-year-olds on the 8-year-olds on the
Wow.
program.
Wow.
I had some kids who came in, and once I had a 9-year-old, and he was just an old soul. I mean, he was just making jokes and turning, talking to people, and then just had control of the room. And 1 year I had a number of children who said, I want to be in the program, but I don't want to speak. And I said, they're going to be up on the stage. And do you have any ushers? Said, we do now. We do now. You keep showing up. So they got dressed up, and they were in the ballroom waiting to show people to their seats. And that is, I've had people who work behind the scenes. Before COVID, I had a young man who wanted to participate, and I said, let's go over and talk to the AV folks. And I asked the AV people, would you mind if he just sits with you during the program? And he said, your job is just going to be to figure out, watch what they're doing and see what you can learn from them. And then we'll have a seat for you up on the dais with 10 cards, and they have all of that. And more often than not, I'd have maybe 28 to 32 kids on the program. This year was a down year, so I had 23 on the program. And so I went to get him, and the way I would set it up, I would do 4 MCs because I wanted to get people in. How many MC? So, okay, we'll have 2 MCs before we break for breakfast, and then we'll come back after breakfast, and we'll have 2 new MCs that will come out, so I can do 4 MCs. And then you have someone to do the invocation, someone to do the closing prayer, someone to do acknowledgement, someone to do the introduction of the sponsors. And so whatever it is, I take. We had a magician 1 year, and what I wanted to do is, one, to stress, it's not a talent show. It is hopefully an inspiration so that the 1,000 to 1,500 people in the audience can see the state of our young people, 1. 2, to hear what they have to say, because we need to do that. And 3, for the other young people sitting in the audience, I want them in the back of their mind is, I could have been up there. Because at the end, when everyone is taking pictures and they're posing, and they say, I could have done that. I could have been up there. 1 year we had one of the young lady that sang the national anthem and sang Lift Every Voice. Powerful. It was when we were, and one of those years she was in New York. And so we took a field trip to the Apollo, and they got to rub the tree of life and do all of that. And so we just started going up there and sing. And so she went up there and said, you'll be able to tell people you sang on stage at the Apollo. And so we were just there on a field trip. The folks who were working at the Apollo heard her. News media came out, and she was interviewed in New York. That's how good she was. That's how good she was.
Wow.
And that is just, just creating that space and creating that opportunity. But because I only hear snippets, I'm sitting out there on Saturday morning. Please don't do anything crazy. But when you give, usually it's around Friday night that they take ownership. And that's the point. The point when I'm not asking them that you own it. I said, I'm not going to be on stage with you. If there are emergencies or people need announcements to be made, I tell them, give them to me. I'll walk around to the side. I'll hand it to someone, and they'll pass it over to the MC who will make the announcements. They were out there. 1 year, I had a young man who was, and this is where I thought this was maybe about 5 years in, and I thought, well, this is the end of my run. That he got up and spoke and gave powerful testimony to how important the 100 had been to him. And then he shifted. And he said because of the role model experience and the mentoring, that it's just so painful to see two of the leaders in this organization who are openly feuding. I need name check and name check to come to the podium and shake hands.
Whoa.
And that's exactly how I felt. I was going, whoa! No, these are two powerful, multi-millionaire high-ups. And what could they do?
They
They
did
did.
They did it. And so I figured, well, let
The
me...
children told the adults, act like an adult.
Right. And,
Wow.
and they came forward. I took a young lady from Sumner one year, and to participate in the African American History Challenge. And she was a good student. She finished second nationally in the History Challenge. And really on her weight, because people were just talking about her, she would just rock and just buzz in the answer, just buzz in the answer. Wow. And the only they came in barely second to a team from New Jersey. And that if she had had a little more help on her partner, they might have finished first. But I asked her if she wanted to be on the program. She said, well, I can't dress up. I don't have the clothes for it. And I said, we're not going to worry about that. So she came in shorts and a t-shirt. And she gave her speech and her testimony. And what she shared was that 6 weeks prior to her being there, she had given birth to a child. She was a high school senior. She lives in a duplex in the city where the other half of the duplex is a crack house. And she said that and shared with the group that I had never had a positive male role model in my life that on any kind of regular basis, and to be here and to see all of these positive men and supportive has been a life-changing. She went on to get her master's degree and do some phenomenal things. And those are the moments. She never would have been on the program if I had gone in another direction and just said, just send me your polished people. And there was not a dry eye in the house, okay? And I'm sitting,
Did you know she had given birth 6 weeks earlier?
I knew about the birth. I didn't know about the crack house. I didn't know about some of the other things. But that is, I mean, there are just so many stories of kids that were addicted to drugs and now they're not. They turned their life around. You had children that were in foster care and now they're out of foster care. And there are so many stories to be told. And I just didn't want a polished presentation. I wanted an authentic presentation, because what happens when you just put the polished kids in front of an audience, they are as inaccessible to the average kid as adults are. They look at that and say, that's not me.
Right.
That's not me. But when they can hear people tell their stories, and some of the kids would get up and they'd look out, and you could tell that they were just, as soon as, they were there. But I always approached it, and I said, you guys are going to be great. You're going to be awesome. This is just do you. Just do you, but do it in 3 minutes. But we have to stay on time. And what would happen, and they would share it, or they would perhaps get into a rhythm, or they would freeze. But I look at it always like I grew up in church. And because we had some folks who, I want to sing. Okay, they can't sing. Maybe had I heard the whole song, I might have gone in a different direction. But what church is that's okay, baby. That's okay. We got you.
And it's right. Go ahead, baby.
So the audience is going to get them, but what it does, for them afterwards, is that you can just see the posture, you can see the growth, you can see when everyone is coming up and embracing them and the pictures of all the accolades, and that is, and we had an MC, because the MCs, I tell them, that's the most important role. People want to be it because they think, I want to be out front. So if you're MC, you've got to interview everyone else on the program so you know information about them. You know what their aspirations are. You can share something about them, and you got to keep the program going. So our sponsors this year were Shell, Georgia Pacific, and Walmart.
Wow.
And so we got to that point where they have to invite the sponsors up. So they invite Shell up first. And Shell talks about its commitment to the marginalized students and the African American students, and that's why we support the 100. And so he gives a speech, and then he goes back to his seat. The MC comes back and says, "That was amazing. That was touching." Okay. It almost made me forget how high gas is right now.
Good kid. Good kid.
Right, and that is, and so Walmart was up next, and when he came up, he said, "I can't wait to see what you're going to say about me." but this year was hard because none of the kids had seen the program from before. So trying to get them to take ownership of it and explain it to them in those snippets. Usually I would have 2 or 3 people who did it the year before and wanted to do it again, and they would help organizing it. I never had more than 8 at one time in any of the meetings. And I went into Friday night thinking, this is the last year. But Friday night at about 9 o'clock, they pulled it together, and that's when they turned to me and they said, "Dr. Freeman, we got this. We got this." Okay. And that is, and so when I sit out there, I mean, I hear you have some folks that just seemed like, okay, I'm going to say a few remarks, and that's, and then I've had years where it just seemed like an oratorical slam dunk contest.
Wow.
People see, and you can see the pride that they have in each other, because that's the other thing. I said, when I'm doing the little sound checks with them, I said, "Can I go yet?" No one goes until everyone goes, because I want you to support each other and really be there for each other. So they're hearing what some folks have to say for the first time. And so they're seeing people that were talking like this and now then they get to the stage and they become Barack, Martin Luther King, Douglas. They just take off and they start sharing remarks, and they explode, and you can see this year we had a young man that was going to sing Lift Every Voice. And then his parents called and said that you got to go to a wedding on Saturday. So he said, "Well, I got to withdraw, and I really don't know if I want to do it, or maybe I'm a little nervous," because they would get, "I volunteered, now what did I volunteer for?" So he backed out, and then we finally persuaded 2 people to come, because one of the chaperones said, "She can sing," and she was like, so we put 2 of them together and said, "Well, you can support each other, and you don't really have, you just sing one verse, and you can just say you're going to lead the room in singing, because we really need to have it." So they were going to do that. And then a young man said, "Well, I play keyboards. I can get together with them, and I can play Lift Every Voice." So we got a keyboard for them. We had an artist who had done a 3-minute short film in art. And so he got that and said, "Well, I can do the art thing." So now we got to have that on video. So we got that on video. Then the young man came back and said, is it too late? Can I get in? I said, "Well, we have someone singing." He said, "Well, that's okay. That's it." "Well, hold on. Stay right here. Let's think about this." And so what we worked out is that the 2 that were going to sing started to sing. And then they parted when you got to what would be kind of the refrain for Lift Every Voice. Then he came in and a cappella belted out the rest of it, brought the house down. And so, and I just keep telling them that if you
Teamwork.
bring it, I'm going to find a way to get you in, because people need to see what you're capable of doing, and that inspires them to do more when they see more, because the motto of the 100 is what they see is what they'll be. But the more we see of them, the more chaperones are engaged, the more the other young people are engaged. I had a number of young people, I want to be in next year. Yeah, I'm coming back next year. And that's that whole formative experience is what, and it's grown to be a centerpiece, for that conference. And it works. If you give children opportunity and ownership, more often than not, they will rise to the occasion.
Right.
And that is, and so this is.
So, all right. So I'm going to
Thank you.
segue a little bit, just
That
a
was
little
good.
bit,
That
because
was really-
I would also say we have now another one of our regulars, Cassandra. Would you like to say hello?
Hi.
Hi, she made it. So many of our group are actually traveling around the country or doing other things. So
Traveling in different countries.
in different.
Yeah.
My housemate Lynn is in New Zealand right now. We were actually hoping
Which-
maybe
which-
she could join us. But anyway, that's happening. So among the other multitude of talents that Terry has is he is a writer and a poet. And so maybe would you talk a little bit about your poetry? Maybe read us a poem? Yay, Terry,
Yes.
Terry. All right.
Yeah.
This is your evening.
I don't know what to be when I grow up, so I dabble in everything. My sister would say, everything that you do for fun, you turn into a job.
That's right.
And so that is, I started in martial arts, and I started teaching martial arts, and I dabbled in poetry. I guess when I was 7, my first poem was, I have a little sister, she's very, very bad, and when she goes to sleep at night, I'm very, very glad. She breaks up all my toys, she fusses at the boys, and she's always in my hair. I'm glad I don't have a pair. And that was my, so then from that I dabbled here and there and doing this and that, and just really liked poetry, but I loved science, I loved engineering, I loved history, I loved sociology. I love school, and that is, so it wouldn't be surprising that I would end up in an academic environment. And so I was going through a hard spell, one of those roller coaster rides where you reach that point of, well, what am I doing with my life? My life really sucks. I need to find myself. And so I was going through this rough thing. So I started hanging out with these poets and then I started hanging out with them. And then I was part of the committee that was helping to put together the Langston Hughes Poetry Festival. And it is, so I met Shirley LaFleur and Eugene Redmond and that, so a bunch of folks that you were hanging out. And the Langston Hughes Poetry Festival was just a tremendous festival. It was an 8-day festival in St. Louis that used multiple venues, where they would have poetry at the Botanical Gardens or at some of the college campuses, at one of the museums, or, I mean, that is, so Harris Stowe participated, what's that? This was around 2000, that eventually it moved to Atlanta because we weren't really strong enough. And there were a lot of spoken word artists that were involved. Some of you may remember or may have heard of The Last Poets. And that was way, way back, with Gil Scott Heron, and the revolution may not be televised, but in that era you had The Last Poets who were doing a lot of political spoken word at the time. So in that circle, I got to perform with them on stage, with that. And part of the introduction to getting involved was they had a contest. And so I wrote a poem, And in response to the, I guess, Langston Hughes, Negro Speaks of Rivers. So they said, write a poem that is reflecting on that or responding to that. And so I wrote Relentless River. So I'll share that one.
Okay.
If I can find it. Help if I put my glasses on.
They're on your chest, Terry.
Yeah, but that means I would have to reach for them.
So quick with it.
I thought he didn't know you were.
He just draw you into it.
Okay, and that's the Langston Hughes. Okay, and just an aside, my dad got to hang out with Langston Hughes. You know, when he's all these things that he didn't tell us when we were younger and growing up. But my dad was a charter founder of the Omega Psi Phi chapter in St. Louis, and Langston Hughes was Omega Psi Phi. So the chapter invited him in, and since he was one of the charter members, they met with him and got to hang out. So it's like a little thing. Oh, Dad, you knew Langston Hughes? That's a little something you could have dropped at dinner somewhere along. But that is the Negro Speaks of Rivers by Langston Hughes, which was published in the African American journal Crisis in 1921. And as he writes, I've known rivers ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. It's 8 o'clock. Rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. And so what I wrote that actually ended up winning, but that is, I am a river, fed by the tributaries of diverse origins, Langston's rivers, the flow of genius that built civilization and the pyramids before depositing its wisdom in a Greek delta. The river of pre-Columbian Africans streaming across the Atlantic and feeding a continent that had not yet discovered Europeans. The Moorish flood that soaked the darkened Europe, cleansing ignorance and washing it with renewal. They called it the Renaissance. The river of black gold, diverted from humanity's cradle and dammed by centuries of subjugation, merged with blood from the massacre of noble native streams, swept along by lies and broken promises until only the names and legends remained. My channels overflowed with sweat from the pulling, plowing, and planting that propped up a new nation, and I weathered the high tide of tears from the inhumanity of being raped while others reaped. And still, I surged with courage in the face of challenge, irrigating deserts of despair and filling wells of hope and accomplishment. I am the tumultuous rapids formed by the confluence of an oppressed river with eddies emanating from the source of the oppression, calmed only by the outpour from the pristine lake of the Holy Spirit. Whether a trickle or torrent, I am a relentless river, running wide, running deep, but always running, eroding rock, carving canyons, and incapable of being ignored. No matter how many streams may swell my banks, I remain an African river capable of directing my own course. When swollen by the torrential rains of an African consciousness, convergent with currents of unity and direct action, I rage with irresistible force. But just around the bend, I'm an easy river, a soulful river, reflecting on the countless streams that gave me life. I am the river that transports the silt of this collective experience to a fertile delta, enriching humanity before being swept into God's sea.
Really,
That was deep.
Yeah.
And if you mind, they won't say
Right, Jay, I think Jay was going to say something.
I just, somebody said that's deep. I said, yeah, like the river.
I wrote a
How
book
long
called
have you-
Eclectic Voices.
How long did it take you to write the other poem?
That
One
poem,
you just read.
maybe about a week. I mean, you write and you come back and visit that.
Yeah,
Okay,
Cassandra asked how long did it take for him to write that poem. So in
and
case
this
you
is
could hear.
this is a
This
book,
is show him your book.
Eclectic Voices,
Okay.
and those are relatives, all
Oh,
family
wow.
members.
Let me sit down. Oh, cool.
So was your poem
That
about
was some of the pictures you
3 times
shared.
longer than
Yeah.
than Langston's?
Probably about that.
You took it and you ran with it.
And that is, this
You
is
had a lot to say. I can see why.
this is my great great grandmother, the slave owner,
Wow.
and that is down here. That's my great great grandmother and grandfather, the former slaves, who lived in the same area as the
What
slave
area?
owner.
What area?
Outside of Jackson, Mississippi,
Okay.
Brandon,
You
Mississippi.
probably got candy. What year?
Yeah.
Because that's what Max.
What's that?
So we're talking about late
Yeah.
1800s.
That
Yeah.
is Grandma Liza,
We're all
and
connected in some.
that was born in the mid 1840s,
Yeah.
and her oldest son was sold from her. Oldest daughter, first child, was sold from her while she was a slave, and never did reconnect
That's what happened.
with her.
That's
But
what happened.
this is when I told you I was doing all of that self-reflection, and then I got kind of involved. But then when you told me that you were falling in love, I paused, then noticed the tear that my hesitation had caused. If my slowness of expression somehow gave you the impression that my heart was not in session, that was never my intent. You have altered my direction on the wings of our connection, and I've soared beyond affection to a place that's heaven sent. There was nothing that could hinder all those moments shared in splendor. Even gravity surrenders when our passion's in the air. All fears and trepidation were replaced with rare elation as we built a strong foundation for the feelings we would share. So if my apprehension seemed like love was in suspension, that was not my heart's intention, rather what the falling meant. When I first looked at you, it wasn't long before I knew that surely this thing we would do was never headed for descent. There was no contemplation that inferred our destination was some rapid declination from the place we started out. I'm not trying to be humble. This affair is not a stumble. We're not headed for a tumble. That's not what this love's about. There's no struggling, slipping, tripping while we're reaching, grasping, gripping to avoid the cuts and ripping at the flesh of our rapport. Our love is still ascending, never yielding, never ending, so I cannot see pretending that a fall is what's in store. This love can't be denied. It left us feeling satisfied, supported, hopeful, edified, and ever seeking what's above. I didn't pause to tear your eye. Your love has brought me to a high, so falling can't be my reply. With you, I'll always rise in love.
Wow. Oh, that was it. Anyhow. Hey, I love it.
All right, I know Billy needs to go. I see that wave. Maybe Billy, you might want to just say something to Terry before you leave. And you're muted, sweetheart.
I put it in the chat.
We can't see
You
it.
know, for me to share about Terry would take longer than the time we have to be together. Terry and I go back decades, just like I don't know if I met him before he met you, Joyce. I don't know. Maybe it was around the same time.
Around the same time.
Yeah.
About the same time, and I had the awesome opportunity to work with him as World of Difference facilitator. But not only that, our paths have crossed in other arenas as well. And I don't think there would be anyone that you could talk to, and you mentioned Terry's name, that they would not just spill forth with accolades. Terry, I know you do what you do in deep humility, but I can't think of a greater servant on the path to humanity, helping humanity than you. And you're focusing it on the young people. And that is, I said remarkable in my chat comment, but to be able to inspire and motivate them is, I think, a gift. And it is a gift. You know, I want you to recognize that it is a gift to be able to communicate with them and to to touch their souls that everybody doesn't have. But you have it. You have it. And I am so grateful that you walk the earth at this time. So I just want to say.
Well, I
Yeah.
thank you. And with my new hips, I'm
and as you can see in my comment, there needs to be a part 2. There needs to be a Terry part 2. All right. See how quick he is with.
So quick. All right.
All right. Goodbye, family.
I kept thinking that last poem. I said, my son would turn that into a rap so easily. The rhyming, the rhythm of it, and I can hear the beatboxing in the background. I don't know what to say. I feel like I'm an inadequate kind of thinking person to even comment, you know. I make joke when I can't do anything else.
Well, Jay is an artist, a wonderful painter, and you would probably create a beautiful painting.
Yes.
But I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your comments. And I just look at how each person shares his or her gift, and in that sharing, you never know where your creativity or your expression or your power may lead. That is, we celebrate Martin Luther King, but he had a bunch of teachers, and he had parents. And so everyone we celebrate, you never know what you might say, what you might do, just in passing. I tell the story of the young lady when I was managing Skate King, and I was locking up to leave, and 11-year-old, 12-year-old girl was outside of the skating rink, and she was lighting up a cigarette. And I was about to get in my car and just drive off, and I said, oh, that's such an ugly habit for such a beautiful young lady. And I rode off. I saw her again when she was 26, and she said, you might not remember me, but you said this to me when I was a kid, and after you said that, I never tried to smoke again, and I don't smoke now.
Wow.
And that is, but I could have said something, and she could have been on the corner as a crack addict. And so it's just a reminder to me that words and opportunities can and change can happen in just such a short time. And then that's why why it distresses me so much, but I can't get to despair when we have people right now who have the intentionality of inflicting trauma on people, where it can be done so haphazardly or incidentally, and you don't know, we have no way of measuring realistically how much damage is going to be done that may not reveal itself
Long time.
until
That's
till later on.
That's right.
It's one thing to be inadequate in dealing with someone's trauma right now. It's another thing to up the ante in trauma, and to try to build systems that are, and the thing about systems, especially, is that they're put in motion. And I think sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that, oh, there's some kind of planning and cabal that is getting together. If you put a system in place, you can go sit down and rest. And other people will keep the system running. In fact, you can put a sexist or a racist system in place, and women and marginalized people will run it for you.
That's right. Unfortunately.
And that is, well, that's just, well, I know, but that's just the way it is. Okay. That's just the criteria for the loan. Okay, we don't. My hands are tied. There's nothing I can do, and that is. And that's the danger of systemic. If everything was a personal decision, it would be one thing, but once you erect that system, then you just turn the switch on, and right now my air conditioning, I hope, is running at home. I don't have to be there monitoring and setting the temperature. It will just run automatically. And it is, I don't necessarily want to lapse into it, but I'll just say it anyway. When we are now looking at removing rights and supplying more guns in a volatile situation, it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see how this can go sideways. And that when you
continue, yeah.
That's a greater philosophy.
And we've never removed rights before. Well, it's a reminder: no right is ever permanently settled. And that's where I guess those who vote and those who organize and those who march, if there's something good that comes out of this, which may take some time to find out, is maybe getting to that understanding that nothing is settled. There's always pushback. And when you stop nurturing, protecting, being vigilant, and supporting, then things erode and go away.
That's right.
And there are people in this country whose North Star is privilege, power, and profit. Period. Period.
Terry,
And I
so you have another question?
I wanted to ask you about the groups that were meeting. I heard you say it's the 100 Black Men group, but it sounds like the youth that they're serving are both male and female.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just wasn't sure about that.
It started out when the organization was first formed, they were looking primarily at men and the need and the presence of men in the lives of boys. But it didn't take very long before it became clear that there's an importance of men in the lives of daughters and girls also. Because if you don't have good role models, male or female, for children when they're younger, that affects choices that they make when they're older or what they're willing to accept. And a good positive male role model or mentor for a young girl can help her to not settle for knuckleheads later on, because there's a benchmark there that's saying, no, that don't fly here.
And when she rejects the knuckleheads, then the knucklehead shapes up. But if the knuckleheads get accepted, then he stays knucklehead.
Right.
And they both lose.
I used to joke about it, and I said, that is because I was the shy kid in elementary school, and in elementary school, middle school, actually all the way through high school. But I used to say that, this is the sad state of some of our boys. It's all the fault of girls. It's all the fault of girls. And what I would joke about is that it is the kids who were smart in middle school, and oh, you're so wonderful. You were just like a brother to me. Okay. And maybe I can talk to you about this roughneck that I'm trying to chase over here. Because he can run and he can jump and he can do that. And I said, if the girls in middle school were standing around and saying, and he can read, and I was watching him do math, then boys would be walking around with books.
Good point. Good point.
I like it from everybody would still be living in the caves if it wasn't for women who said, no, this won't do.
I freely admit that a lot of the frustration that I have in life is because I don't have a keeper. And that is just that counterpoint that says, no. No, okay, that is, don't bring that in that. See, I would not have the clutter that I have. Because my daughter is my daughter, but so there's not a lot that she can do because she's my daughter. And that, other than say, when you're gone, all of this is going right after you. If you think I'm going to go through all of this, I have to tell her, but I think there's money hidden in there.
Well, she might pause for that.
No,
No.
she won't.
You should see my basement.
I think
My brother left the.
I think the iPod will be.
That's right. Yes. Right.
All right. Well, before we close, Judy, I'm going to give you another chance. If you're anything you'd like to share or any question.
Thank you. I have a question, and I can't think of a group better to ask this to, and I hope I'm not offending anybody. Why hasn't somebody, since Clarence Thomas is now going after contraception and all these other kinds of privacy, why is nobody going after him about miscegenation?
Oh, he left that off.
What?
I know he did, but why
I-
isn't somebody? Why isn't somebody going after
He
him
wasn't going to
about
mention
that?
the Loving court case.
Mm.
Well, I married to a white woman.
Right.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
what he's,
He's
That's why
right.
he can't bring it up.
well, actually,
No, of
I
course he
looked it up.
can't. But I mean, it's like he can. Maybe he's safe in all these other areas,
It's a lifetime.
but he's not safe in that one. And I mean, the man clearly does not have a lot of empathy, but maybe a way of getting to the empathy he has would be for the shoe to go on the other foot.
Well, the problem I think with the courts right now, and they are heavily politicized, is that they will find the legal theory to support the outcome that they want.
Mhm.
So we're
Yeah.
not we're not going to lose interracial marriage, and so he's not concerned, and he knows his colleagues enough that even if that came before the court, that's not going to. They're not going to do that. So he didn't mention it, and I'm sure that he knows that that is safe based on the colleagues that are there. Who know, I mean,
I think
if they let it stand, it may be problematic later on. But there's no way that they can dial that back because there are children of those relationships.
I think it's simpler than that when I looked it up. This, it's simpler because all of these due process and stuff is built on the 14th Amendment. And 14th Amendment was specifically made to stop racial discrimination. I mean, so it was really based, 14th Amendment is clear about its relationship to race and racial discrimination. So I think Loving's being about interracial marriage, it has a tighter tie to the 14th Amendment than does. But the other ones that are building privacy based on due process and things of the 14th Amendment is a little bit different.
That combination of the Griswold decision with the 9th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, and and what happens in the courts is that they don't like to wrestle with the things that aren't clear. They should.
Yeah, I
And so they ignore well-regulated militia, and they ignore the 9th Amendment. And the 9th Amendment was specifically placed in there because the Federalists in Madison said, we don't want future generations to make the mistake of saying that only the rights that are enumerated are the rights that the people have. And the 9th Amendment says that the rights are retained by the people, not the states, but by the people. And there are unenumerated rights that are retained by the people. And that's where the Griswold decision came back and said that when you look at the opening clauses and you look at the amendments and you look at all of that together, it is not hard to get to an inferred right to privacy as one of those rights. Conservative justices hate that. They hate that. They want to turn the 9th Amendment into a states issue, so that, well, no, the rights don't go to the people, they go to the state.
But that's not what it
And they
says.
do that because they want states' rights because states' rights allows them to do a whole lot of stuff,
A whole lot of stuff.
given that the rural states have outsized power.
So I think we're going to kind of bring this to a conclusion, and I'm just so grateful to Terry for being so kind after
Yeah.
a full day of just have been traveling. And
I'm honored to be here to
Oh,
hear
me
all
too.
of it. All of it,
So
yeah.
I'm just wondering if you have one other poem you'd like to close with.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do that.
Tribute to female poets. All right.
It's a tribute to Maya, Gwendolyn, Lucille, Mari, Nikki, Sonia, and other phenomenal sisters of verse. These poetic pioneers are blazing trails of gained respect, and though they feel the fear, they're not afraid to risk their necks. They're down to earth while flying high, and you can trust they don't pretend, and they'll never leave you wounded in the house if you're a friend. We suckled at their wisdom while they nurtured us with light. They taught us by example that two views could both be right. They rounded all the corners you could find in curving skies, and for unity they're scheduling elitism's demise. They soothe us in defeat, and they give verse to victories. They scribe defining moments from collective memories. They parade their brilliant insights on a darkened global stage, and like the best fine wines, these sisters just know how to age. These nurturing sisters, sweet soul sisters, mothers of misters. We rubbernecked and high-fived as they strut on shapely limbs, and they let us know their value metaphored as precious gems. Their sunny smiles seduced us as we fell for starry eyes, and they danced like they had diamonds in the meeting of their thighs. They loved the way we walked, and they returned our crooked smiles. They heard our best smooth talk, and still they stayed, at least a while. They dreamed of fairy tales with endings happily ever after, and wanted men of steel until we'd stolen all the laughter. We scammed them, feigning love and often promised diamond rings, while offering new chapters to the reasons cage birds sing. Through all the lies and larceny, their loyalty remained as they ventured all in love with precious little to be gained. Hurting our sisters, these lovers of misters, raising love blisters. Ego's alive, but not really tripping. These lyrical tailors just keep right on ripping the fabric of ignorance, shredding resistance, stitching consistence, and quilting the remnants. Sometimes, like this tailoring gives us a fit, kidnapped and dressed by their feminine wit, journaled and studied, metered and phrased, discouraged and criticized, pumped up and praised. They held up the mirror and forced us to see the brothers we are and the men we could be. Describing the good times that should have been sad, or how rich we were with how little we had. These grand elocutionists, seated in sorrow, pregnant with words, dreams, and hopes for tomorrow, won't disappear, fade, or yield to the pain. They're not cotton candy left out in the rain. These sisters of soul, the soul of a nation, stepped on the stage in Jehovah's creation when he recognized man would not be enough, that he needed a sister to bring the right stuff. These creative sisters, sweet soulful sisters, teachers of misters. For all of those sisters serving as queens and sovereignty rising from cradle through teens, living the stories not yet to be told and gathering nuggets of unexpressed gold. For all of the things I know they will do and undeserved times I know they'll be true, I bow to their majesty, pledging my loyalty, rising to honor phenomenal royalty. Phenomenal queens.
Beautiful.
All right. Thank you, wonderful women, for
history.
joining us. Love you. God willing, we'll see you next month.
This is greater than a...
Bye bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
This is
Yeah.
a treat. This was a